I believe that everyone is scared of something, or at least has some insecurities about themselves that prevent them from doing or trying certain things. There are legitimately some things that you should be fearful of, like jumping out of an airplane or swimming with sharks. For me, even if I'm fearful of doing something, I try to have the attitude and give it a try and try not to let fear stop me. I might still be scared, but I'll try it anyway. I've had the great fortune of having some great teachers or mentors in my life. I say that because, well, they didn't just educate me to be book smart. They really dug deep and taught me lessons about life. In kindergarten, we had a physical education test on how long we could jump rope for. And each student, each of us would take a turn and the teacher would time us for how long we could jump rope. And so when it was my turn, I was so terrified because, well, for one, I didn't know how to jump rope. And two, my athletic coordination at that time, well, it was horrible. So while I was waiting for my turn, I just prayed and prayed that somehow I would get through that. And when it was my turn, I just tried my best at it. Now, part of the issue about my physical coordination was that at that young age, I was taller than most of my classmates. And everything from the desks, the chairs, the equipment, it was really, I was just too big for it. And that attracted a lot of negative attention. And I would often get teased or made fun of. Oh, Eric candidate, Eric candidate. And I'm like, I would, my reaction to being teased and made fun of was I would just beat everybody up. So with the jump rope test, when it was my turn, just as I would had expected, I got tripped up. My feet got tangled in the rope. And of course, everyone was just laughing. I mean, it must have been a funny spectacle, I will admit that. But I just remember this feeling of embarrassment, shame, and my insecurity started to really come out. And I just started to cry. And for everybody that was laughing, well, I just would walk up to them and just that's just how I reacted to that. Like I said, I've had some really, really great teachers in my life, and my kindergarten teacher, she was one of them. Her name was Mrs. Terauchi. After that jump rope incident, she held me back after school. And surely I thought, uh-oh, I'm busted for punching and slapping everybody in the face. To my surprise, she said that she wanted to teach me how to jump rope. And me being a 5-year-old, I said, no, I don't want to learn. It's too hard. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to jump rope again. And I was just more or less afraid of failing at that and just being embarrassed about it. So at that moment, I just said, nope, I made a vow, I'm not going to do it. But more so, Mrs. Terauchi, she wanted to teach me a lesson about how I reacted and handled things and how I'm still reacting, in fact. She really dug it, or she really took it to heart that she wanted to teach me how I can respond to an obstacle or a challenge like this in a more positive way. She told me a story of a time when she failed at something and everyone laughed at her. She was trying to play the ukulele, but no matter how hard she practiced, it just would not sound right, and it just, quite frankly, sounded funny. So funny that really all of her classmates and even the instructor, they would all laugh and make fun of her. But at that time in her life, unlike my 5-year-old self, she was in her teens and she knew how to handle an embarrassing moment like that. Still, I must admit that having the teacher, even the instructor, making fun of you, that's gotta hurt. At that moment, Mrs. Terauchi, she learned a very important lesson about how to respond positively to something challenging, as well as how to support someone else that is also going through that type of challenge. So she made a promise to herself that she would never tease or make fun of those that try. She would make a commitment to help them instead. And so that is exactly what she was trying to do to me with this jump rope incident. I I remember her saying, Eric, Mommy and Daddy are not going to be around your whole life to protect you from everything. So one day you are going to have to put your big boy pants on. You're going to fall down, but are you going to be a big baby and cry about it? Or are you going to be a big boy and get up and try again? And so I said to myself, I was physically a big boy, but now in her own way, she was trying to tell me that now it's time for me to act like a big boy. And the message that she was conveying to me, and the message that I was receiving from her, was that not to be afraid of failing or challenging something. If I let fear of failure or the feeling of it's impossible, I can't do it, if I let that stop me, then I was just really being a big baby. So for the next few weeks, every day after school, I would stay a few minutes with Mrs. Terauchi, and she would teach me how to jump rope. The way she taught it was rather interesting because she broke it down into simpler steps. And I remember this analogy that she gave me. She said, in order to learn how to run, you must first learn how to walk. But in order to learn how to walk, you must first learn how to stand up. And in order to learn how to stand up, you have to build your leg strength and develop your balance. She was breaking down this whole this process, and what seemed like something very impossible for me to do, she broke it down into simpler steps that I could practice. And as I got better with each step, she would add on the next step, and we repeat the steps again. And then when I would master that step, she would add on something else. That's how I began my practice of jumping rope. Of course, me being a 5-year-old, anytime I felt like there was a roadblock in the process, I would try to cheat my way out of it. But Mrs. Terauchi, anytime she saw me trying to cheat, she would stop me and she said, no, 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 start over. There were many times, I should say, that I would fall and I would just start crying. But she said, no, 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 get back up. Come on, let's go. Try again. Or if I would say, this is too hard, I can't do this step, she said, stop complaining. Put your big boy pants on and let's go. And the moment that I accomplished or I could start, I felt like we mastered the current step, she would very briefly go, yay, okay, here's what's next. And so in a way, she was really giving me some tough love, the kind of love that only someone that truly cares can give. After about a month or so of practicing every day after school, I was finally able to jump rope on my own. And I would jump rope for about 30 seconds or so at each time before I would just drop dead out of breath. So after about a month of practicing every day after school, I could finally jump rope for about 30 seconds. And after 30 seconds, I would just basically drop dead because I was just out of breath. Mrs. Terauchi, she told me that, hey, we're going to retest the jump rope again. On the day of that retest of our jump roping skills, this time I was feeling a lot more confident that I could pass the test because, well, I had practiced all that time, and I knew I could do it because I was doing it. When it was my turn, all the kids, they started giggling, and then I kind of shot them this look like, remember what happened the last time? And immediately everybody just kind of went silent. But I started jumping rope. To everyone's surprise, their jaw just, like, they couldn't believe, they were waiting for me to fall, but they in disbelief, they were surprised that I was jumping rope. And eventually, Mrs. Terauchi, she saw me jumping rope, and then she started saying, "Come on, Eric, keep going, keep going, keep going." And all the other classmates started cheering me on. And they kept saying, "Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going." And eventually I did stop at about the 45-second mark. I just kind of dropped again because I was so winded. After everyone had their turn, it ended up that I actually had the longest time of jumping rope. And so Mrs. Terauchi was just very, very proud of me about that. 2020 hindsight, the lesson that I learned from this experience is how to not let fear and failure, or maybe better said, how not to let the fear of failure stop you, but to break it down into simpler steps and conquer each step one at a time. And yes, I can jump rope, but don't expect me to do a double dutch at this moment. Nuh-uh. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you avoided something because you were afraid that you were going to fail at it horribly? Or maybe you did give it a try, but it didn't turn out as good as you thought it would have. Like the first time you try free motion quilting, maybe it just came out really, really bad. Or maybe you were trying to quilt some feathers and it looked more like a rooster's head. I see a lot of quilters just really avoid things. They're afraid of trying new techniques because they feel like it's too hard. And I'll be honest, in terms of when I was trying to learn quilting and developing my own sewing skills, there were two things that I actually avoided. One of them was Y seams. The other one was learning how to sew curves. I knew that eventually I would have to kind of face my fears and just try and conquer these obstacles. And, well, sometimes you just need a little push forward just to take that first initial step. If you've been following the Treasure Heart Creations channel for a while, you might recall that block number 4 of the 52 blocks, 52 weeks challenge. It was the clamshell, and that block was given to me as a challenge from a quilting friend who was trying to push me into conquering my fear of sewing curves. And she was just basically just trying to say, hey, just go for it. So with the challenge issued to me, and I was not about to back down from that challenge, I just kind of collected myself and I watched a whole bunch of tutorials on YouTube or wherever I could find lessons about quilting. And, well, I just tried to do my best and just try and figure it out. One of the tutorials that I came across, it was from a company called So Kind of Wonderful. And in that tutorial, they were demonstrating how to use their quick curve ruler template. And as I was watching the video, I was kind of thinking to myself, that looks very, very familiar. And the light bulb just kind of went off. I remembered that a few years before, I bought that same quilting ruler from a quilt show. And I also bought the accompanying pattern book. But I stashed it somewhere in a jar and forgot that I even had it. So immediately I kind of got up and went looking for the ruler. I did find the ruler in the jar that I thought I had put it in. And I grabbed some scrap fabric and I just said, okay, let's have a go at this. Now the first few blocks or curved blocks that I tried, I'll admit they were horrible. And instead of looking like a quarter of a circle, they kind of looked more like an oval. It was very, very frustrating. But just like the jump rope incident, I said, okay, let's break this down into some smaller, manageable steps. And I just kept practicing. I learned that I do have this tendency of stretching fabrics really badly, which is why the curved turned out more like ovals. And I also learned that my 1/4 inch seam allowance, it wasn't really consistent. When you sew a curve, or when I was sewing these curves, that fact alone was just magnified. And so that explains why my blocks weren't looking the way I thought it should look. But with a few hours of practice, I got pretty good at it. And I was at a point where I was kind of satisfied with how the blocks were turning out. I mean, you could see a distinctive curve, and it kind of looked like a quarter of a circle. So I was satisfied with it. By all means, they were not perfect, but they were good enough for me. I filmed the video for the 52 Blocks, 52 Weeks series, but when I was done with the video, I said, I'm going to challenge myself to take it one step further, and I'm going to make a whole quilt out of curves. So I picked up the pattern booklet and I just kind of flipped through the pages of it, and I said, that's the pattern. That is the pattern that I am going to make a whole quilt out of. And so that was the journey to making this quilt. In the pattern booklet, I kind of really didn't like the fabrics and the colors that they used in their example quilt. So I went with a different color palette. And it took me a while to finish the quilt top, because this was one of those projects where I would work on it a little bit, and then something would come up and I would put it away, and then maybe a week or two, maybe a month or two later, I would take it out and come back to it. But I knew eventually I wanted to get this particular quilt top done, because there was a message that I was trying to say with it. I did get the quilt top done, and I'm kind of happy with how it turned out. Every time I look at this quilt top, I'm just reminded of this jump rope incident and of Mrs. Terauchi. She taught me a very important lesson at a young age about perseverance, about facing your fears, about facing your insecurities, and taking what seems like an impossible task, an impossible obstacle maybe, and just breaking it down into some manageable steps, so that what seems to be impossible really becomes possible. And in a way, she taught me how to use fear, not as an excuse to stop you, but really as a motivator to help push you forward. You may be afraid to fail. You may be scared to try something different because you're scared of what might happen in the end. And those are natural reactions, because we're all human. All of us get scared. But in quilting and in life, there's going to be times when you are going to fall flat on your face, or you are going to be embarrassed about something. But as long as you can pick yourself back up, take one step forward, and keep taking one step forward in what might seem like a very long and dark tunnel, I promise you, if you keep moving forward, one day you'll come out on the other end and you realize that along the journey, you created something beautiful. I've often heard that courage is not the absence of fear, but being scared and still going through with it. Well, I've also learned that courage can also spark creativity. So I say, let's be courageous and let your creativity fly.